Welcome to the LeaderCast podcast, a weekly deep dive into the stories that transformed our guests into leaders worth following. I'm your host, Joe Boyd. If you've been enjoying the podcast, thank you so much for being a listener. One simple thing you can do to help us out is give a review wherever you listen. Today's guest is AJ Vaden. She is the CEO of Brand Builders Group, a company that helps you find your personal brand and monetize it. She has an amazing sort of origin story from her childhood, and you're also going to learn how to think about sales in a way that isn't super salesy. AJ Vaden, welcome to the LeaderCast podcast. Super excited to have you today.
It's going to be great.
Let's do this.
I'm ready.
I have gotten to know and become friends with Rory, your husband. So this is our first time officially meeting you and I. Thanks for hanging out with me. Let me get to talk to you some today.
Yes, well, I'm excited about it. It's always fun when people know my husband so well before, because I was sharing with you before we hit record. It's like I'm lucky enough to be married to someone who actually is my biggest fan. He's like my own little free PR service. I don't know what I did to deserve such a good partner in life, but I got one. So I know that he's probably oversold me. So I'll try to meet whatever expectations he set.
That's all right. I understand that my wife needs no PR. She's the friendliest, happiest, most outgoing person in the world. And she's a travel agent. She's in St. Martin right now. She used to travel over. But people just love her. I always tell people if they meet me first, like, if you like me a little, you're going to love my wife. Like, but let's tell us a little bit, like, let's just start where you are today, because I do want to get back and kind of hear how you got here. And but tell us a little bit about Brand Builders and what you do and what your sort of work is these days.
Yeah, so I get to have the title of CEO and co-founder of Brand Builders Group. I always tease that, CEO in my experience stands for Chief Everything Officer, because somehow I end up doing everything. It doesn't matter if it's trash or paying bills, and sometimes I get to make decisions, I think. But I'm really, it's such an honor to get to be a part of leading Brand Builders Group. We are a personal brand strategy firm for what we call experts. And I say that with bunny quotes because I know expert is such a loose title, but for us, we really feel called to serve what we say is the mission-driven messenger. So maybe it's an author, maybe it's a speaker, coach, consultant, or maybe it's an entrepreneur or an executive. But ultimately, it's that person who feels like there's this message that is sitting on their heart that they feel like, man, I am on this earth to tell this message, to share this story, and I really don't know how to do it. Help me, somebody. That's why we exist. It's to help that unique individual try to live out their dreams and also hopefully positively impact some people along the way. That's the end goal, and make some money while they're doing it. Doesn't hurt.
Yeah, no, not at all. That's always good. I would love to get into that before we finish here, because, I think obviously most people kind of accidentally have a personal brand if they're a leader. Sometimes it's quite unintentional. I feel like I have 5 at once often because it's so hard for so many of us to do the thing that might give us just a little bit of interest or influence in the world. Takes so much work just to do the thing that then you suddenly realize, oh, people also have a perception of me as a person as well. So I know that you spend a lot of time helping folks kind of break down the mystery of that, I would assume, and see what to do.
That's our whole world. That is, like, when we talk about, like, we help other people live out their calling, like, we feel like this is our calling. And, it's interesting because personal branding is new terminology. This language of personal brand is somewhat new and trendy. But the concept is as old as time. It's your reputation. We all have a reputation. Thus, we all have a personal brand. And it's just how many of us are going, am I known for the thing I want to be known for? And most of us aren't, because we don't even know what it is that we want to be known for. So by default, we become known for what we do. We become known for our profession or this thing that someone else associates us with, without any real intention or focus of going, no, like, when you think of me, this is what I want you to think about. And, I had a real sobering moment for myself post Brand Builders Group, where we actually do this for a living, about 3 years ago. And Brand Builders Group, we still say we're a baby company. We turned 5 this year. So we're a baby. We've been doing this for a long time, but as a formalized company, only 5 years. And about 3 years ago, we were, I don't know, some event. And my husband, who's my business partner, who has been my business partner for about 15 years, introduces me as the best salesperson he's ever met. And I thought that was such a fascinating way to introduce me. And so I let him continue on. And I'm like, at the end, he was talking about like, our former life and our first company. We did, lots of sales coaching and consulting. And my full-time role was working with a lot of Fortune 100 companies and really just helping people increase top line and bottom line, and wasn't very soul fulfilling for me.
Yeah.
I thought that was so fascinating that he associated me with this thing that I don't even do anymore. And so I let him do his whole spiel, and we're walking out and I'm like, so what a fascinating way to introduce me. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, one, you didn't even mention that we have this new company.
Right.
And he goes, oh yeah. And then it dawned on me, I hadn't done the work for myself that we so teach others. And so I think it's like, even for me, who's in this business, who leads a team of people who do this for other people, I really hadn't even done it for myself. And my own husband, who knows me better than anyone else on this planet, is introducing me in the completely opposite way that I actually want to be seen, that is impactful to me. And he was like, well, how would you want to introduce? Like, how would you want me to do that? And I'm like, great question. Don't know.
Yeah.
I should do our own exercises. And I think that we all fall into that. We don't spend near enough time thinking about those sorts of things. And so everyone comes up with their own assumptions by default.
That's such a great story. That's a physician heal yourself kind of story, right? The other thing is Roy should have known better. Come on, get it. Right. You're a very nice spouse and partner, but come on, Roy. That's another way to look at it. So let's go back. If you don't mind, can we go back in time to you as a little girl? And I would just love to hear, like, what were you interested in? What was captivating your heart? Would you be shocked that you are a CEO now, based on the kind of little girl you were? What was going on back then?
Yeah, I'd say I've had a very, I'm going to use the word interesting journey that started when I was 7. So my family was traveling from Dalton, Georgia, my hometown, to Chattanooga, Tennessee, because my older brother, who I adore, so don't hear this the wrong way, really suffered from ADHD and behavioral problems, and pretty much terrorized myself and my younger brother.
Yeah.
And so we were on our way to a family counseling meeting, and we were on I-75, if any of you are familiar with that long stretch all through the Southeast. And we hit, all of a sudden, this immediate traffic jam. And it was very sudden. In fact, it was so sudden that the tractor trailer driving 70 miles an hour behind us didn't see it and hit us head on. And that changed the trajectory of my life, and for a lot of other people that day. It was a 13-car pileup. I don't remember exactly how many people died that day, but my entire family was pronounced DOA. I was the only one that was pulled from the wreckage. And I remember sitting on the side of I-75. I was 2 days after my 7th birthday, in this New Kids on the Block t-shirt. And finally, police cars came, and they set me in the back of that police car, and they gave me spearmint gum and just said, sit tight. And I watched as eventually ambulances made it, fire trucks made it, the jaws of life, and then eventually the helicopters came to transport my family that I didn't know if I would ever see again.
Yeah.
And so by the time that I made it to the ER, and I was ushered in by a bunch of strange policemen, I remember they stripped me down naked in the middle of the ER because I was so covered in blood. They were trying to figure out where to patch up the wounds, except for I had none. I did not have one scratch and one bruise on me. My younger brother was in a coma for 3 months. Eventually, although they gave him less than 10% chance of surviving, and we had many meetings with our pastor about, is today the day that we should, pull the plug, not so metaphorically speaking. And my parents just refused. And they said, we know that a miracle is coming. We believe it. My mom broke her neck, her collarbone, an arm, a leg. My dad had really beat up, but eventually recovered. And my older brother His entire facial cavity collapsed. They were going to put steel plates in. And then they told my parents they couldn't do it because the bones had started healing themselves with no medical explanation. The vegetable that they told us my younger brother would be, he woke up asking for Rice Krispies. Now, he had to learn how to walk again, talk again. Basically, as a 5-year-old, he was truly like learning life again. And so I spent the majority of my childhood for the next 5 years touring around the country as my younger brother was labeled as the Children's Miracle Network's telethon Miracle Child of the Year. Okay. And so we got to go to Disneyland with Marie Osmond and Debbie Gibson, if you guys want to take it back to 1989. And we did all these things. And I spent the majority of my childhood hearing about how my brothers were miracles, about how God saved them, and these miraculous things happened to these two brothers of mine. And, you know, there was a trucking company, there was a huge lawsuit and a huge settlement, and my brothers got lots of money from the settlement. And so I grew up watching my 16-year-old younger brother buy a Mercedes with the money that he had gotten from the settlement. And I just remember thinking, like, they're the miracles, and I'm this kid's sister, right? And that's how I spent my whole childhood of going, I'm not important. I'm not of value. Like, I wasn't the one who had this miraculous recovery until I went to college, and I was sitting at a sorority parent event, and my little sis in the sorority, her name was Katie Cyphers, said, I really want you to tell your story to my mom. She's a psychologist. I was like, I don't know, is this like free therapy or what? So I gave a very short version, even probably shorter than that. And she looked me dead in the eye and she said, oh my gosh, you're a miracle. And at that point, I was 21 years of age. And for the first time ever, did I actually look back and go, oh, wait, I'm a miracle. Like, my life was saved that day. Like, I was spared in such an extraordinary way, because the truth is, would I want any of the trials and tribulations that my brothers or parents had to go through? Absolutely freaking not. And it was such a perspective shift for me and I think that just happens to all of us in life. And I just remember, like, that moment was a pivotal moment in my life of going, no, I was like, I have purpose. Like, that happened for a reason. And that was like one of those like defining moments in my life over like a chicken dinner where somebody just shed a little bit of that perspective. And it was like, that was a life-changing moment for me, which is interesting. It wasn't the accident per se, although that did shape much of who I am today. But it was really that moment of going, whoa, whoa, whoa. How did I miss this? How did I miss this miraculous part of this story where I somehow thought I wasn't a part of it? And so much of my childhood was spent a little bit in the shadows of thinking like I'm not as good or as important or as valued as my brothers. And it wasn't until I was in college that I realized, like, oh crap, I missed a big part of this story. And you know, and that was a really life-defining moment for me, and also getting just exposed to I think the blessing of all of that is I started believing in miracles at a really, really young age, and saw the handiwork of God at a very, very young age of going like, I see the power of prayer. I have parents who like prayed on their knees for months straight. I saw miracles happen right in front of my eyes that were completely medically unexplainable. So I had the gift of seeing that at a really young age that really transformed how I saw what was possible in life. And then when I was 15, my mother was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. And so we all had this expectant view of like, he did it before, he'll do it again. And he didn't. And she died 18 months later, right before I turned 16. So she was diagnosed when I was 13, but died when I was 15. And it was another one of those defining life moments of, whoa, I thought this was just that thing that you get diagnosed with, and then we all celebrate when it's over a year and a half later, and that's not what happened. And so the day that my mom passed away, I really became an adult. I grew up overnight and became pretty independent pretty quickly, as you know, I had a younger brother who was somewhat dependent on lots of support in his life from our childhood accident, and a parent who didn't know how to function without a spouse. Which as a spouse and a parent today, I completely relate to.
Sure.
And so I grew up real fast, and I have a really cool entrepreneurial family. The family business has been around now 75 years, but made a really important decision soon after my mom's death that this isn't for me. I know that I'm not meant to work in this family business, and I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And so I graduated high school from Dalton, Georgia, and probably been back less than you can count my fingers and toes. Not that that's a good thing. But that shaped the trajectory of I want my own entrepreneurial journey. And so.
Wow. I didn't know any of that. That's an insane story. Where my head goes is, I think I learned this from Richard Rohr, but that it's generally pain and failure are the two things that shape us the most. And the flip side of that is the folks that we spend almost all of our lives trying to avoid pain and failure, obviously. And the folks that do manage to avoid it tend to feel like they have some growing up to do when you run across them, you know? And we talk a lot in this podcast as we tell people stories. We stumble upon the failure parts usually, but yours sort of starts with, a lot of pain. That's a lot to go through. And it obviously you would have become a very different person had those things not been part of your story, right?
Yeah, well, I think the thing that's interesting now is clearly there's lots of days and moments where like all I want to do is pick up the phone and be like, please tell me I am not the only parent in the world who has these crazy kids, right? It's like I would love to like have that conversation with my mom of like, just remind me that like I was a problem child too. Like this is going to get better, right? Right. But at the end of the day, it's like I really do believe it's like, although they're not fun parts of life, it's like I'm so grateful for the way that God has orchestrated the events in my life, however traumatic, which they were. It's like I know I wouldn't be the person I am today. I would not have the perseverance, the strength, the courage, the persistence. I would not be who I am today if those things had not happened. It forced me to become a different version of my potential. And I probably would have preferred to do it a different way, to be honest. However, I don't take back any of those things. I'm super grateful. I can look back now, hindsight 2020 is such a gift, isn't it? And go, if my mom had been alive, I would have I know where I would have gone to college. I know the choices I would have made, and they would not have been the ones that led me to where I am. I know that.
Yeah.
And so it's good and it's healthy. And I think a lot of that is what pushed me to go pretty confident. At some point, I realized this, I'm virtually unemployable. I learned that young of going, I'm not ever going to be a great employee. I have a hard time with that. And I think a lot of it is because I became super independent really young. At 15, it was like, make your own lunches, figure this out, like handle yourself. I got to take care of myself. Like, right. And then I realized it's like, oh yeah, it's like, I don't want people to tell me when I have to come to work or how long my vacations get to be. And a lot of that stirred in that. And I remember when I graduated from college, my very first job, I only lasted 6 weeks. And I remember I got called into the office because I was wearing pants that showed my ankles.
Oh, scandalous.
Oh, that was very scandalous. And I remember I got called in and I was so mortified that I was like, I can't work here. Like I have to quit. And my next best option was to get a job at a boutique. And one of my childhood best friends, but also my college best friend, was this guy named Dustin. We pretty much grew up together in Dalton, Georgia, went to the University of Tennessee, the real UT, and, SEC for life. And he called me up and he was like, you're working at this boutique. I'm going to start this company. I think you should start it with me. And, at age 22, I had so much experience that I thought I was real qualified to do that, working at a retail boutique. And he said, no, like, this is going to be perfect. You're not doing anything. You're just job hunting. Like, stop looking for a job. Like, help me start this company. And I was like, I know you. What company are you starting? This is nonsense. And his sales pitch was basically, we're going to move to California. We can eat sushi every day and make sales calls by the pool. And I was like, well, that sounds
Sure.
better than working in this boutique. So,
Yeah.
okay. I don't even think I asked what the job was, to be honest. And I was a little bit of going, well, it cannot be worse than what I'm doing. Cannot be.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, we'll see how it goes. And my venture into entrepreneurship was really naive, and it was just being willing to say yes.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. We started our first company in 2006 in the heart of a recession. I didn't even know what a recession was.
Sure.
That was very much for my benefit. And we started that first company, which is also how I met my now husband. And that company was awesome until it wasn't. And it was a ton of learning experience. And when I got to California, I realized what I would be doing was calling companies out of the yellow pages, because that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And they were so kind to give me the letters W, X, Y, and Z, because I didn't know any better.
Sure.
And so I was calling on all these local sales team in San Jose, California, convincing them with all my experience to have me in to talk to their sales team. And I would come in for free, do a free sales training. And at the end, I'd do this completely for free. I'd customize it for you. You'd let me talk about this event that our company was putting on in just a few weeks. And if you let me talk about that, I'll do all this work for free for you. And I had never sold anything in my life. And now I am selling people on having me to come in to train their salespeople so that I can then sell them. And I get there and I'm just panicked. I'm like sweating, can't breathe. Like, what? This is what I'm doing. What? But I remember going like, what am I going to go back to? Like, I didn't have a backup plan, which was really good in my case. It was a Cortez moment, burn the boats. There was no option B. There was no plan B. Figure it out. And I remembered I remember learning like, oh, this is what it means to work. And what I learned in our first company is the power of hard work. And it didn't have to be easy to be great. And similar to what you said, I'm reading this book right now called The Circle Maker by Mark Batterson. Mm-hmm. It's one of the best books I've ever read. And he said that we very rarely look back in life and remember the things that came easy. But we will always remember the things that we had to fight for, that we had to overcome, whether it be events or battles or whatever it was. It's like we remember the things that were a challenge, because that's how we know that we've grown and we've accomplished. But we very rarely remember the things that were easy. And starting that first company was anything but easy. I think I made $24,000 my first year. I think I still had to have my dad help my car payment. And he's like, are you sure you don't want to come and work in the family business? Are you sure? And then I remember my second year, I made $40,000, and it was still, are you sure? And then that third year, I think I made like 55, and then it was 80, and then it dropped back down to 60 when we started a new division of the company, and then it was like 100. But then I remember from 100,000, I went from 100,000 to 300,000 in 12 months. And then I heard this gentleman who wrote a book called The $1 Million Consultant. And I remember being very naive and very cocky as like a 27-year-old of going, this guy can do $1 million. Surely I could figure it out. And it was that naive confidence that was like, sure, I can do that. So I set this like huge goal, and I was like 28, I'm going to sell $1 million in consulting next year. And the most I'd ever sold was, made was 300,000. And lo and behold, I sold $1 million and $1,000 that very next year. And then the lesson I learned in all of that is like, it takes time, but hard work pays off. And I remember somebody told me, it's like, you always get paid for how hard you work. Not always now, but eventually you always get paid for how hard you work. And it was the most awesome lesson in entrepreneurship and in sales and in marketing, and the power of just don't give up. And eventually, at some point, this will pay off. And eventually it did.
I'm not the world's best interviewer, because I tend to have like 10 follow-up questions, and I just have to pick one. But where I want to take, what interests me is I haven't read a lot generally about the connection between leadership and sales in a way that isn't kind of like, doesn't feel to me as like just a way to get more sales. But so I think the questions I want to ask you is, because as you were on that journey, and I can see why, knowing Rory, your husband, I can see why you all connected. He has that in him too, right? That sort of drive and desire to be successful. And I'm curious how you journeyed as a leader, as you also were clearly working hard and becoming a good salesperson. And could you just talk a little bit about leadership in the actual context of sales, and is it different than leadership anywhere else? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so interesting. Somebody asked me on an interview a couple of weeks ago. They said, "What do you think is the number one thing that every entrepreneur, i.e., leader, needs in their repertoire?" And I literally said, "You must be a great salesperson." Like that's the number one key to great leadership, great entrepreneurship, is remember that sales first. And so I would say, like, my journey to leadership was your team will do half of what you do right and twice of what you do wrong. So do as much right as you can.
Wow. That's
do as much
good.
right as you can. And it's like at that time, our
say that again. Would you say it again? So let it
Yeah.
sink in. Yeah.
Leadership is all about your team, understanding that your team will do half of what you do right and twice of what you do wrong. So make sure you do a lot right.
Yeah.
Lead by example. And that was my path to leadership. It was 100%. I'm not going to ask you to do something that I haven't done and I'm not willing to do. And in my case, a commitment to doing it really well. And so my approach to leadership was, I'm going to teach you because I've done it. I'm not going to teach you because I learned about it. I'm going to teach you because I've been there. I know the emotions. I know the feelings. I know the tactics, and I know I can help you.
Yeah.
I know if I can do it, there's something within you that can make you do it too. And so for me, whether right, wrong, indifferent, this is what my path is. It was 100% of I'm going to do it first. Like my job as a leader is to do it first.
Yeah.
It's to prove the path, to show that there's a way. Even if it's not your way, you can create your own path. But I think I liken it to, I don't know if you've seen the new Top Gun movie.
I have indeed. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, to me, it's like, I saw that at the end and I looked at Rory and I was like, right. It's like, that's like our whole leadership belief is like, his team could not believe it was done until he did it.
Yeah.
And then they did it.
Yeah.
That to me is the vision of a leader. And I think, and the art of sales in that is it's like, sales is the path to great leadership, because sales is just another word for influence.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
They're synonymous, just like reputation is synonymous with personal branding. Sales and influence are synonymous. And, our whole thing around sales is people get it wrong. Sales is not convincing people to do something they don't want to do. Sales is truly, it's providing enough value and giving people options. The end. It's asking good questions so that people can make a decision, yes or no. If I get a no, I made a sale. I got you to make a decision. I don't have to get yeses all the time to make sales. There's always a sale being made. It's sometimes we just don't like the answer.
Yeah.
The answer is no. And that was, I did not do a good enough job in that particular situation. And also knowing it's all about timing. Roy teases that there's a law of AJ in our company. The law of AJ is that I never hear no. I only hear not right now.
Yeah. Right. I think that's,
not right now.
Yeah, it is. For many people, sales, if you haven't done sales, maybe even if you have, can have a negative connotation of the sort of slimy, sleazy used car salesman kind of vibe. And I feel like I've noticed, and maybe this happened a little in my life too, that people become leaders, natural leaders, and not all leaders come through the sales department, right? Mm-hmm. And then suddenly you realize, oh, now I'm leading a sales team or a sales effort. And I may have had, actually, I didn't realize it, but I think I've had negative feelings about sales. A lot of people are that way, and they just haven't had to deal with, they've been dependent on that part of the organization for sure, but they haven't been involved in it. So I like the way you sort of frame it. Does that resonate with you? Do you see that happening?
100%.
Yeah.
100. It even happens in our organization, even though it's like we're a sales first organization. Yeah. It's like, but my sole belief is just like how customer service is integrated into every single department of a company. So is sales. Yeah. Recruiting and interviewing, let's not be confused. That's a sales job. You want someone to come and work for you. at the rate that you want them to do. And like, that's a sale.
Yeah.
Getting people motivated to do the job that you asked for, that's a sale. Getting people to hit deadlines, stay on time, stay on budget, that's a sale, because that is not easy for people to do. Holding people accountable, that's a sale. Customer service, turning people around, it's one of the most underpaid, hardest jobs on the planet. It's like, I do not know why customer service departments get paid less than what they should. Like, that to me is like teachers. It's like you're talking to all the grumpy people, and then right, it's like it's one of the hardest jobs there is. That's a sales job, and these departments, these leaders, don't get sales training. And it's like, again, sales is influence. It's the art of communication. It's the art of knowing what questions to ask and what order that makes someone go, oh, I don't have to be angry at you.
Yeah.
No, you don't. Like, those are all sales.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's like the root of any successful leader or department is rooted in the ability to have effective communication, AKA sales.
Yeah. Well, this is great. Time's flying by. I want to honor our time commitment. I do want to talk just a little bit about your brand building business and that. Before we leave here, you can invite folks to learn more about it, of course, and to find you. But briefly, quickly, if you wouldn't mind, could you give me like the top 3 things that you think folks need to learn or aren't aware of when they think about branding or, branding themselves, selling themselves, basically, right? Could I ask you to do that? Yeah.
Yes, I'll tell this in a little bit of a story of how Brand Builders Group got started, and tie it all together. So I mentioned how we had this company before. And in 2018, I walked into a routine budget meeting on May 4th, actually, and I left unemployed. I got, as my husband so kindly refers to as, I got canned. Very unexpectedly, very dramatically. And I had, got asked my opinion a couple of weeks before. And if you don't know me very well, but those who do, I don't know how to cushion it appropriately sometimes. So I shared my opinions, and then I got fired. But that's okay. It was a much needed thing that needed to happen. I needed some humbling, and all things work out for the good of those who love the Lord. And I believe this was for my good. The long story short, I got fired on May 4th. And on May 6th, a guy named Lewis Howes, who has a super successful podcast called The School of Greatness, called us up. And we had met him years before, just helping him with his book launch, which is something that we do at Brand Builders Group, is we help authors launch their books. And he wasn't a client. We didn't do this as a business. We were just helping him as a friend. And he said, I don't know why, but for the last few months, I keep getting this nudge that I need to reach out to Rory, my husband, and you. I feel stuck in my business. I don't know. Can y'all help? Yeah. And we said, well, ironically, we have a lot of time on our hands. Sure.
Yeah.
Soon after I got fired, my husband resigned from our company. So you could probably put 2 and 2 together there. But he flew out to Nashville, Tennessee. And at the end of those 2 days, he said, y'all, this is your new business. This is why all this happened. Here's this thing. I've got a mastermind in 2 weeks. If you guys can put together a little plan, I'd love to have you fly out and present your new business to our mastermind. And I said, we don't have a new business. This is not our business. We don't, this does not exist. Long story short, we spent 2 weeks hiking, praying, and planning, and coming up with some frameworks to teach other people what we taught Lewis, which is ultimately what we've been doing for ourselves for a really long time. Yeah. So we came up with this little mini business plan. Rory flew out to LA, presented to that mastermind, collected credit cards on a very secure piece of paper, brought them home to me so I could figure out how to process them. And that was the genesis of Brand Builders Group. That's how we got our first 2 clients in the middle of a crisis. And 6 weeks later, Lewis said, listen, I know that if you can help me the way that you did, without a plan, I know that you can help other people. I would really love to help you launch this business. And at that point, we had kind of said, maybe this could be a business. Maybe this is a thing. And he said, I'd love to launch your business on my podcast in July of 2018. Note, we left our first company in May. I got fired before we left. And so it's not like there was a lot of time here, right? And this will get to a point, I promise. And on July 27th, this podcast went live with a landing page that was unstylized, that was white, that had my picture and Rory's picture next to each other with an orange button that said, request a call here. And we had no website. We had no email list. We had no social media. We had to forfeit that over. We didn't even know if we'd get to keep the IP of our first 2 books. We had no email list, no social media, no website, no podcast, nothing that you would think someone would need who is starting a personal branding firm.
Yeah.
Nada, nilch. And we launched that business with that one page on Lewis's podcast. And over the next 90 days, it generated 1,000 leads.
Wow.
And $500,000 of business, with a whole bunch of people who just said, I know that if we just teach what we know, we can help. And I share that because what we learned and what everyone needs to know is that a personal brand is not a business model. It has nothing to do with social media or how many followers or likes you have, or if you have a podcast. Those are all, lead generation vehicles. Those are all awareness vehicles. You do not need to have a website to have a personal brand. A personal brand is who you are. It's who you are. It's your reputation. And although we had at that time 0 reputation online, we had built years of credibility offline with investing into personal relationships. And trust that we had done because we just gave. We just said, we don't charge for this. Like, sure, happy to help. And I think that's the genesis of your personal brand. Is like the reason everyone needs one or should need one is a personal brand is a declaration of who you are and what you believe. And it's a trust accelerator. And that's something that, again, isn't new, but it's ever increasingly important. It's like trust is currency. And in this ever increasing digital world that we live in, people want to know that you are who you say you are and you do what you say you're going to do. And a personal brand helps you cement that because you put time, intention, and effort into something of going, this is what I want to be known for. And it can happen offline with no digital assets like it happened with us. But because we had trust with Lewis and Lewis had trust with his audience, that's why this company exists.
Yeah.
It's why we're here today.
I mean, I don't know if ironic is the right word, but his great personal brand helped you launch your personal brand business, right?
100%.
Yeah, right.
100%.
Well, so let folks know, I'm sure people are like, how do I find that current version of that red button? So where can folks go if they're interested in learning more about you or even like requesting some information from you or whatever?
Yeah. So if you go to freebrandcall.com, you can actually request a free call with our team.
Okay.
That's how we get to know you. It's how you get to know us. This is ironically not a sales call. This is a sampling of what we do. But if our team is really good, you'll want it.
Right.
But ultimately, our belief is we're not a fit for everyone and everyone's not a fit for us. But we believe we have something to give everyone on that phone call. So freebrandcall.com is where you can actually request information about us, talk to our team, and get a free sampling of what we do. If you want to just go, what else you got? Like we have tons of free resources. We can make you busy for a long time at brandbuildersgroup.com. We actually have a section on the top of our website that's just called free resources. We have master classes, we have webinars, we have research studies, white papers, whatever your heart desires.
Yeah, it's all there.
We have for you.
AJ, thank you so much for being here. And I'm sure you'll hear from some of our folks. I really appreciate your spirit. Thanks for sharing your story, even the hard parts. I really appreciate that. And tell Rory I said hi.
Yes, thanks for having me on.
Okay, we'll see you later.